and thank you for joining our latest talk with today's focus, which is all about maximising your happiness and your fulfilment at work. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. There's an awful lot of people on the call today, which is fantastic, but could we ask you please to mute your screen so we don't get any interference from any background noise. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Austin and I'm the founder of the Really Helpful Club. I'm delighted also to introduce Caroline Edwards. Caroline is our events director, and Rowan Gerard and Francesca Ashby-Rudd, who are also on the call, who run Really Helpful Club in Surrey, Sussex and Hampshire. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Really Helpful Club, we thought it would be helpful to give you some background as to who we are and what our community is all about before we introduce you to our speakers. Our team each come from professional corporate backgrounds. I was a senior fund manager in the city, Caroline was a leading barrister, and Rowan and Francesca both had successful careers in PR. We've each taken career breaks and we're now on our journey together, building this vibrant and fast-growing community. Now, as many of you will know, Really Helpful Club is an online network that brings together positive and like-minded people to help and connect one another in our personal and our business lives. And we are founded on an ethos of shared advice, trusted recommendations, and a caring community. Everything we do is about word of mouth and the power of networks. This is a high-quality community that attracts positive thinking and like-minded people whose recommendations you can rely on, people you can trust. It is free to be a member, and with over 15,000 members, we are buzzing. Now, with limited everyday human contact right now, we all need to rely on virtual contacts, online connections, and a trusted community. Really Helpful Club is coming into its own. Now, since the first lockdown, we have moved our highly successful events program online, and we have an exciting lineup of events in coming weeks and months. And this has allowed us to extend our reach. And in this vein, there's been so much demand to join our network that we have now launched into Surrey, Sussex and Hampshire with our dedicated team based there. And the response has been extraordinary. And we have so many exciting things planned in the coming months. So make sure you visit the website regularly, look out for our newsletters, and contact Caroline about anything to do with our events program. Now, the last year has been extraordinary time in everyone's lives, and the meaning of work has changed for all of us. Many of us have had the realization that perhaps we're not as happy with our work or with our career direction as we might want it to be. And if you are looking to feel happier in your current job, or looking for what will make you happier in a new job, or thinking about what you need to focus on when shifting your career entirely, then raising your level of self-awareness can help you think through positive priorities and actions to improve your work happiness. And at Really Helpful Club, our Back to Business program of events, talks and workshops have helped over 1,500 men and women to take their next step forward. And our network is full of expert advice and support to help you. Today's workshop will be run by Really Helpful Club directory member, Natasha Chatur. Natasha is a qualified and accredited coach with a corporate background. Natasha works with highly capable individuals who are feeling lost, stuck, and not in control, and to help them find work happiness once again. She believes passionately that at every moment of work, unhappiness and dissatisfaction, there is opportunity to be found. Now, before I hand over to Natasha, just a little bit about housekeeping and guidance with format and timings. The session will last an hour with a soft finish at 2 p.m. We want this to be very relaxed, informal, and as engaging and interactive as possible. We are here to help you and this is a very safe and supportive space. If you have any questions or comments, pop them into the chat box as we go along. You can direct these to everybody, or you can direct them privately to Caroline Edwards. And Caroline will bring these to Natasha's attention as we go along, and she will chair a question session at the end of the talk. Now, as you've probably gathered, the talk is taking place on Zoom. I think you're all probably very familiar with Zoom by now, but if your camera is on, you will be visible. And as I've said earlier, please make sure that you have your sound on mute, especially when Natasha is talking, to cut out any of that background noise. We're recording the session and we'll be delighted to send this to you. And this is just on the proviso of two things. First of all, we will register you as a member of Really Help the Club if you're not already registered. It means that we can stay in touch with you, send you our newsletters and let you know what's going on. And remember, you can always unsubscribe if you wish to do so. And secondly, you will also be subscribed to Natasha's own newsletter. Again, if you don't wish to be subscribed to either of those, please do contact Caroline Edwards directly by email and let her know if you don't want to be. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Natasha and thank you very much in advance.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm just going to share my screen. We're possibly going to go on a bit of a tech adventure, so you're going to have to bear with me with some bits and pieces. But first of all, I'd really like you to have a look on screen and answer the two questions. The first one is, how happy are you with your current work and or career direction? And the second one is, how happy would you like to be? Now, the way to do this on Zoom is to take your mouse or cursor to the top of your screen and you might have a View Options tab. If you click on that View Options tab, there should be an option called Annotate. And if you click on Annotate, or you might have a bar at the top, then there's a stamp option, and if it has a little tick on it. If you click Stamp and pick your stamp, you can place on the scale from 1 to 10 your answer to each question. So if you miss those instructions, it's written out there, but head to View Options at the top. Pick a substantial stamp. Sometimes the small dot doesn't really show, so you might want to pick the star or the heart or the arrow, so it's a bit more visible. So head to View Options at the top, Annotate, find the stamp function, just to have a think, see where everyone is. Great. Okay, so we've got a spread on how happy people currently are. So between the 4 to 10, we've got some mid-range and some high, and then where we would like to be is towards the 8+. So that's great. And I think this workshop is about kind of moving the needle. So wherever you are on that scale, it's just about shifting that a bit to get closer to where you want to be. And the happier you are, the trickier that might be on working it out. But hopefully this workshop will help. Now, one housekeeping thing from me is that I have some tech issues with my sound. So I'm going to need you to pin my video before I dial in on my phone. So where you can see my video, there's 3 dots in the top right-hand corner of the video where you can see me. If you just click on those 3 dots and click on pin, you'll pin my video and I'll dial in separately, if that makes sense. Can you hear me now? Yeah, great. Okay. So I'm just going to pause this share. Thank you everyone for contributing on that. I will just clear this screen.
So as Sarah said, 2021, I think, is going to have some continued impacts of what we all experienced in 2020. And something that we're all thinking about on a global scale is the meaning of work. And some of us have realized maybe we're not happy with work as we thought we were. We're not perhaps no longer motivated by career direction that we're in. And maybe we want to take control back a little bit of what work we're doing and what direction we're heading in, and about our future of work. And some of us might be thinking about getting back into work after a career break or after having faced redundancy. And so this is kind of an approach on how we can start to think about what that might look like. And within this workshop, we'll think about the importance of work happiness. We'll have some time and space to focus on what's going on in our own minds and heads. I'm going to present 4 questions to you to work through. So again, I'd encourage you to have a pen and paper handy. And off the back of that, hopefully you'll have some actions, some meaningful actions to start to work on. And I think the thing to think about is when you do feel like work or career direction are not feeling so appealing anymore, it can be quite destabilizing. I certainly felt that way when I went through this. And it can catch you off guard, especially when there's no clarity as to why you might be feeling that way, or what's missing, or what needs to change. And certainly a lot of the people that I work with do kind of say it can cause you to feel quite lost or quite stuck or confused, or there's kinds of words like that, you know, that you're not feeling in control when everything on paper looks really good, but you're just not, doesn't feel right for you anymore. And it can be really hard, therefore, to know where to start. There's, you know, where do you start and put your energy to start to uncover what could work for you? And sometimes there's no really immediate answer. And sometimes the approach that I like to kind of take is an inside out approach, because sometimes we can look on the outside, like what's a different job title, what's a different environment, what's a different industry. But actually, sometimes the glitch is inside of us. Something has changed for us. Maybe our values have changed. Maybe we've gone through different, you know, life events that have meant that our priorities are different, our needs are different. And so an inside out approach sometimes is a better way of trying to understand why there's this dissonance going on for what work looks like currently. And then starting to reframe that as an opportunity of where do I start to work out what needs to change, rather than necessarily getting overwhelmed by the fact that something needs to change. And so what is work happiness? And there's a lot of bodies of research on work happiness and lots of people who work on it in psychology. And I think the thing to think about is work happiness is it's not some fluffy, idealistic state or romantic notion that we can dream about, but convince ourselves is not possible. I think there's definitely times when work happiness might be a luxury and it's not a priority, and there's more pressing needs that we might have. But there does also come a time when we can think about what's going to make me happy at work. We spend so much time at work, and I think work happiness has a deeper and more dynamic definition that can be more in our control and can be more within our reach. And being happy at work will be different for all of us. It'll be different based on our professional interests. It'll be different based on our personal values, on our circumstances, on the goals that we have for ourselves. But I think the broader point remains that work happiness has a lot of common elements to it for all of us. With some time and attention and a higher level of awareness and understanding, we can begin to unpick what that means for us as individuals. Because our relationship with work has changed significantly since the original concept of, you know, organizational work and organizational structures. And now a lot of our identity can be wrapped into work. A lot of what we look for in our purpose can be wrapped into work, and our relationship with work has become a lot more personal. It's become a lot more intertwined and sometimes even more strained, but it is significant for all of us. And I was recently re-listening to Esther Perel's South by Southwest 2019 talk on workplace dynamics. And if you haven't read about Esther Perel, she's incredible. She's actually a relationship therapist, but she talks a lot about different dynamics in our relationships. And one of the ones she talks about is our relationship with work and people at work. And so she has a really interesting kind of perspective on it. And she reflects on a relationship revolution at work and the dynamics of lots of different relationship revolutions that we're going through. And one of the key changes that she talks about is a rise in our expectations for what we want from work. And she kind of reflects, never before have we expected so much from our work. We want work flexibility, we want our work to be attentive to us, and we want our jobs to help us find a sense of purpose and meaning in what we do. We used to go to work as a means to an end. Now we can go to work for personal fulfilment, purpose, and identity development. And they're really kind of big expectations and needs and that we put onto work. And how we are at work can also affect how we are in our personal lives. There's a halo effect there, I think, that does seep into our personal lives and our personal being. It can affect how we feel about our future. It can affect how useful we feel, how valued we feel, how impactful, how productive, how effective, how motivated, how liked we feel, how much we feel like we belong. And so there is a huge expectation and a huge demand that we place on work to meet our desires and our needs. Also, when we're happier at work, it's scientifically proven that there are benefits for the business as well. So it does make business sense. And I think this is also a flip that some businesses have kind of are accepting and some businesses are resisting, but it's that flip of, if you're successful, you'll be happy. And actually there's a flip here, which is, if you're happy, you'll be successful. And how happier employees are more productive. You know, there's a stat about 31% higher productivity. Organizations with a happier workforce are a fifth more productive. Happier employees are more creative. They're more likely to stay in the role. So, you know, retention for businesses, which is important. They're more likely to be creative when it comes to problem solving. And I think there's a lot of things that the pandemic has thrown up about how businesses work and the skills of the future, including agility and cognitive flexibility and creative problem solving. And so these are really significant, I think, statistics for businesses and also for ourselves to recognize that actually we will be more productive, we will be more effective, we will be more engaged if we think about how we can be happier in what we're doing. And so if we get into where can we start, there are some common elements that can help us get closer to being happier at work. And it's about taking a shift from looking externally, so away from looking at a job title or a job description or a salary band, and looking more internally and taking more responsibility for our own experiences at work, for our own behaviors and our own actions. And so I guess a way of putting it is, it's less about what we do and more about who we are and how we are. And I think so wherever you are on that scale that we looked at the beginning, whether you're feeling really good, you're at the happy end already and you're wanting to just feel happier, or you're at the lower or the mid-range end, which is, I'm not feeling that great about work actually, and I know I want to be happier. Hopefully the questions we work through will give you some structure and some focus, and a space to be able to take some meaningful action. So this is where it'd be great to get a pen and paper, definitely write down your thoughts and reflections. And there's probably more to do outside of this workshop, but what this workshop is aiming to give you is some, 4 questions to start with and 4 places to start from. So the first question that I want you to think about is, how is your work aligned or not aligned to your values? Now, if you're not currently in work, you can think about a previous role, or you could think about a future role. How might a future role align to your values, and how might a future role not align to your values? The key here is to just adjust the question for where you are, whatever's right for you. The principle is to understand more about yourself. Now, there's a lot about values and lots of people talk about values, and I think they're so important. And the thing to understand is our values they're kind of like your core drivers. It's a bit like an internal GPS. And so if you've ever felt instinctively like you feel instinctively drawn to something or instinctively drawn to someone, or perhaps the opposite, you feel instinctively in conflict with something just really doesn't sit well with you, it's often can be that whatever's happening is aligning to or conflicting with your values. And sometimes it can be that we can't quite articulate it. If you ever have that moment where you go, God, I think that's brilliant and I really love it, I just can't explain why, it just feels really good. It's often coming from a space of your drivers, of your core values. And our values change over time. So it's really kind of important, if you are in a space that's feeling a little bit confused, a little bit lost, if you feel a little bit like you're free falling, is to go back to your values and do them again. Especially perhaps if there have been some life changes for you, a big event in your life, maybe there's now children in your life, maybe you've relocated, maybe you've been made redundant, maybe there's been a change in a significant relationship that you're in. Sometimes these big events can also kind of jiggle around our values, and they can change for us. So I want you to think about, the job or the environment or the people, break work down into more of its moving parts, and then think about what is in line with your values and what really isn't in line with your values. And so, for example, this came up with in a coaching session of mine. I was talking with a client, and he was really, really frustrated with work and wanting to make big changes, but not sure what was wrong. Actually, we uncovered that one of his key values was a value of recognition, and that the work he was doing wasn't getting recognized. He wasn't being acknowledged. There was no credit back to him. There was no kind of acknowledgement of the value and the impact he was having. And it was only when we realized that actually recognition is a really core value of his that we understood where that was coming from, what the root cause was. And that enabled him to go back to work and have a conversation about, look, it's important for me to be recognized. How can we, what can we do about this? Because it allows you to have a meaningful conversation and make, an adjustment that's much smaller than kind of leaving the job entirely. So take an action down. Write an action about what you're going to do about your values. And if you're not sure of your values, then write the action that you're going to find out what your values are. I have a values worksheet that I use with my clients, so very happy to share that if you get in touch after this. But definitely take an action down here, whether it's to find out what your values are, whether it's to write down your values and then check them against work. Take an action for yourself for this one. It's a really good place to start. So I'm going to move on to the next question for you, which is, how is your work maximizing your strengths? And sometimes in corporate, we can get really focused on weaknesses. And I think, I've certainly experienced this, which is you're really, really good at this, but you're not great at this. This is where you need to get better. This is what you can improve on. This is where you should spend your time and energy. And actually, there's a lot more coming from positive psychology now about strengths-based approaches, which is when you're playing to your strengths and when you're building on something that you're already naturally very good at, it can have a huge impact on your confidence. It can impact how you feel about your self-belief in what you can do and what you're capable of. It can impact, how you stand out from other people. It can impact your resilience. So if you're working on your strengths, it can have a huge impact on your resilience, on your motivation. There's a great book called Drive by Daniel Pink, and that talks a lot about if you're focusing on mastery, which is all about improving and getting better at something that you're good at, your motivation and engagement and productivity is much, much more likely to increase than if you were focusing on something that you were less good at. So think about your strengths and think about how you might be able to expand the use of them or extend the use of them or to build them. Think about what you're good at. And again, if you're not sure or you're in a space where you're not feeling terribly confident about yourself, then this is a great time to ask people around you. It's a really quick win to ask 5 people and I would really recommend that there are 5 people from different parts of your life. So whether they are, a mix of colleagues and friends and family, ask them what you're good at. I also have an exercise on this, so if you'd like a worksheet, then get in touch. But it can be a simple one to do if you want, a quick win. is to ask people in your life, what are you good at? What do they think you're good at that you don't know you're good at? What do they come to you for? And think about how you can use strengths with your work and your career direction. How can you develop them further? How can you create more value from them? And this might require some creativity. You know, this might be about going back to work and saying, well, actually, this isn't part of my remit, but I think I could really contribute to this. Maybe I could get involved. This might be about, you know, job crafting a role. It might be about, if you're looking for roles, it might be definitely looking for roles that allow you to build on and use your strengths. And also, when we're working on our strengths in a way that challenges us or stretches us, that's a great thing to do as well with our strengths, because then you're building and developing that strength further. And of course, once you're working on things that increase your motivation and improve your engagement, then you're also working on your positivity and happiness. So again, I'm just going to give you kind of a few seconds here, but capture an action for yourself. What are you going to do about your strengths? Are you going to work them out? Are you going to go back to work, and are you going to find a way of extending the application of your strengths? Are you going to have a conversation with a line manager about how you might be able to contribute more value to the team, to the project, to the department, because you feel like you could bring something to the challenges that are on the table? So just have a note of what you think you can do with the things that you're already really good at. There is a disclaimer here to pick the strengths that you enjoy, because sometimes we can be really good at something, but we don't enjoy using that strength. So just have that filter when you're thinking about your strengths. Focus on the ones that you enjoy using, the ones when you're in flow with, that you feel positive about. So I can see some people writing, so I'm just going to give you a second. I don't want to rush through this. So question 3, I'm going to move on to, is inside or outside of work, how can you explore what you're naturally curious about? So sometimes we can, you know, we can get caught up in all the things that we have to do in our responsibilities, and we don't have time or make time for the things that we actually really love and enjoy, and it can feel like a luxury. There's something about when you're in a space of feeling a bit lost, of feeling confused about work, of what is my direction, how am I going to be happy about this? There's something about opening your mind and getting creative, and a good place to start is following your instincts and looking at what you're naturally curious about. Think about the things that you don't have to be paid for, asked to do, and you do them anyway. What do you naturally gravitate to? What topics or themes or activities? But don't overthink this one, because sometimes you can think too hard about this one and get caught up in this cycle of, well, I love rock climbing, but rock climbing's got nothing to do with my job and I don't have time for it, and it's, you know, and you end up nowhere. So I would say don't overthink this and don't question yourself too much. If you are drawn to something, if it makes you feel excited, if you feel instinctively interested in it, follow your nose. Find out a way to explore it a bit more. Ask questions about it, consume content about it, attend webinars about it, go to information evenings about it, talk to people who are already in that space about it. And don't be led by what you think you can get out of it. Let go of any attachment to the outcome of where it might lead or what might happen. Just take the action, take the steps, and see where that goes. And I think if you can free yourself from expectations, from your own expectations, I guess, and from the expectations of others, you know, and without thinking about how it fits with your work direction or your career direction, then you're giving yourself an opportunity really to explore something else. And I think, you know, if you're in a set career or in a set path or in a set corporate space for 15, 20, 25 years, it can be really hard to give yourself that space to say, well, actually, maybe I could do something else, or maybe there is something else that's possible for me. And that can be really overwhelming. And actually just starting with what you're curious about and what really instinctively gets you is a place to start, and you just don't know where that might lead. You know, and it's, I don't know, if you're a head of operations but you love jazz music, just spend some time looking into jazz music, whatever draws you, because you honestly just have no idea where these things can go and what it might open up for you and how you might feel. And the reason I say also follow what you're naturally curious about and not what you're passionate about is that's intentional, because I think sometimes we can worry about, I don't have a passion, what am I passionate about? And it's a lot of times I think passion comes from application. And so if you start to learn, if you start to be curious, if you start to explore what instinctively captures your attention, you know, then you can start to create that passion for yourself through the application of what you're coming across. And it can be a really fun method of opening up your mind, especially when you're doing something and have been doing something for a certain amount of time. And when you don't know what else could work for you. It's not often that we can give ourselves permission to do something without any agenda or any attachment, but do have a go, do think about this one. And it might overlap. There might be something that, you know, you might be able to build on your strengths with something that you're naturally curious about. There might be an alignment with your values, but take note, like stay really, like pay attention. Take note of what's giving you energy. Take note of what's making you feel positive. Take note for things that don't work for you. And just capture that and start to build a picture of, alongside, you know, what your values are, what's important to you, alongside what you're really good at. Start to build that picture of actually what you really love and enjoy and find positiveness in. So take an action there. Write down one thing you can do. Doesn't matter how small or how big. Might be something you used to do 10 years ago that you haven't done in a long time, and your action might be, actually, I'm going to do something about that. Write down one action. And so the final question that I'm going to ask you to think about is, who in your network and your network's network, that's the important thing about the network, it's the power of the networks. It's not just your immediate network, but their network too. This is personal or professional. Who in your network and the extension of that network inspires you? Who do you admire? Who are you intrigued by for the work that they do or are doing, or the career that they have? People you come across, so people you might see on LinkedIn, maybe friends of friends or family of friends, and there's always someone who pops into your life and you're always thinking, gosh, I love that about them, or I really want to find out more about that, and I wonder how she does that, and oh, I wish I could do that. Whatever comes up for you, think about 5 people in your network and the extension of your network. Because talking to people and leveraging your network is also one of it, kind of an easy win, if you like, of somewhere to start. And again, think about this without agenda, without expectations of the outcomes. This is just about having conversations and finding out more and exploring how other people have done certain things. Because if you are instinctively kind of attracted to someone because you admire them, or they motivate you, or you get a lot of energy from them, there's something there. There'll be a reason that that's happening, even if you can't articulate it. It might be linked to your values. It might be linked to kind of maybe some more subconscious goals that you have for yourself, some underlying ambition that you have. There'll be something there. And so it's really worth just tapping into who stands out for you. And this is about being less passive about this. So it's a bit less about seeing people on LinkedIn and maybe just giving them a thumbs up, or just reading what they do and enjoying that. Or, you know, having a casual conversation with someone socially, which I know we're not doing at the moment necessarily, but if you think about, you know, those conversations in the pub and you really like speaking to someone, this is about having like a really pointed conversation with that person. Hey, you know, there's something about your work or the way that you do things that I'd really like to understand more about. Do you have half an hour for a virtual coffee? So think about how you can build relationships and start with your network. And stretch yourself here. This isn't about people you know and you always talk to and someone you feel comfortable talking to necessarily. It might be, but there might also be some stretch in this. There might be that person that you would love to talk to, but maybe don't feel like you can get in touch with them, or you have enough to say to them, or it doesn't feel relevant. But I think the thing to think about is that everybody likes being asked questions about themselves. We're all human, and generally people can be really, really helpful if they feel that they can help you and if they feel that you are not wasting their time. So definitely think about how, you might have to think a bit about what your pitch or your angle might be for each of these 5 people that you want to talk to, whether you're asking them about how they got to where they got to, whether you're asking them for advice, whether you're asking them if there's an opportunity for you to learn more with them. Just prep that bit before you have the conversation or before you write the connection message or email or LinkedIn message. And once you start having these conversations, let's see how you can build on them. Think how you might be able to make an impact for them, collaborate with them, add value to what they're doing. Just think about the things that come up for you and stay really open to the opportunities that might present themselves. I remember when I was feeling quite unhappy and dissatisfied with work, and I started doing this, and I was actually quite overwhelmed by how different people approach things so differently and did things very differently. And I think certainly I'd been in corporate for 15 years, doing things a certain way, surrounded by people who also did things a certain way. And it wasn't until I kind of broke out of that and spoke to different people, I understood how people did things like, who were really creative problem solvers, who did things like used innovation, who did hybrid jobs, who did kind of a bit of that and a bit of this and crafted their own job descriptions. And it was just so interesting to see how different people approached this. And it really broke my perception of, well, I'm doing a 9 to 6 in financial services, whatever else am I going to do? It really helped. So I would say if you've got those 5 people, have those 5 conversations. And I can tell you this much, that you never know where a conversation will lead. That's fair, but it will never lead anywhere if you don't have it. And so there's something about just starting those conversations. So take that action for yourself. I want you to write down 5 names of people in your network or in their network or the network of your network. And again, don't overthink this. Go with your instinct a little bit. Who do you just genuinely feel drawn to and inspired by? And again, I'd encourage you to take some time after this workshop to carry on reflecting or to continue just writing down your thoughts. But to summarize, you've kind of got 4 points there. You can start by knowing your values. You can start by identifying your strengths. You can start by recognizing your curiosities. You can start by having conversations, specific pointed conversations with specific people. And so whatever you're looking to do, whether you are looking to be happier in your current job, whether you're looking to be happier in a new job or your next chapter, or whether you want to shift your career entirely, whatever's driving you to feel a sense of, I could be happier, things could be better, I could feel more positive and more engaged and motivated about work. Hopefully these questions have given you some positive priorities and actions to start to improve. And I think if I was to share my learnings from going through this journey a few years ago, I would share these things with you to take on board. One, that significant change is not easy and it's not fast. It's the iceberg, I guess, analogy, which is, yes, you can see the shiny change at the top, but don't forget all the work that goes into getting there. It does take time and effort, but it is entirely possible. I'd say the second thing is you have to take responsibility for the change that you want. And that's just having a sense of personal agency. And so again, hopefully having some actions from this workshop gives you somewhere to start for yourself. I'd say the third thing is that even if you don't know where to start, you do have to start somewhere. And I've kind of distilled where I started and the approach I took when I went through this into this workshop. But your values and your strengths are a great place to start, a really, really good place to start, because if you can get to know yourself better, then actually a lot can come from that. It is a process, so don't expect to have the answer overnight. And do lean on resources and support networks and the professional network that you already have access to. Definitely lean on the resources that are closest to you. And I also know I could have done it much better, much quicker with a coach, but I didn't know about that then when I was going through that. So that's what I'd like to leave you with. And it is really encouraging that I think workplace happiness is becoming more of a thing. I mean, even Indeed.com work with the UN. The UN does their annual happiness report about countries and the happiness index. And actually, Indeed.com work with the UN and the University of California to do a work happiness report about workplaces and how employers and employees can start to understand how they can improve engagement and happiness at work. Because it, like I spoke about, it's not just good for us as individuals, it makes commercial sense for businesses too, which is great. And it's all backed a lot by kind of positive psychology. So that's where I leave you with the workshop, and we'll definitely go into some Q&A now. I would say two things for next steps. One, do take a note of your actions, and the extra thing to do with your actions is write down when you're going to do them by. Just time bound them. Are you going to do them in a day? Are you going to do them in a week? Or are you going to do them in a month? Because if you bind them by time, you're much more likely to take the actions. Again, that's up to you. It's a choice that you'll make. And also, if you do want some perspective and some support, then I'm very happy to have a conversation with you about your particular situation and what's going on for you. And if you would value kind of a more one-to-one space, then definitely book in for a call with me.
Great, thank you, Natasha. That was so interesting. I've recently done a lot of work on values, and I think it's a hugely important aspect of happiness generally. How many values do you think you should concentrate on?
So I normally say 5 values if we can go off the screen share for a second, if that's okay, just so I can see faces, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So I would say 5 is good, and prioritize the 5. So when I do values with people I work with, there's a selection of about 30 to 40 values, and it's a tricky exercise, but if you can get them down to 15 and then get them down to 10 and then down to 5 and then prioritize those 5, it's a good place to start.
I can sometimes feel guilty about prioritizing my happiness at work above other priorities. How should I deal with that?
If there's kind of guilt around prioritizing this or finding that really difficult, then maybe there's some extra work to do there about what might be making you feel that that isn't a priority or feel guilty about that being a priority. So sometimes addressing the root cause of what might be stopping you from making it priority is a better place to start before then going into it. And that's what I would say is work out, raise your level of awareness and understanding of why you feel like it's not a priority, or why you feel guilt about making a priority before you go into it. Because otherwise, if you go straight into it, you might just setting yourself up for failure, because you won't get very far, because your feelings of guilt will hold you back.
What would you suggest is best to do if I start to feel really stuck at work?
Definitely start with the 4 questions is a good place to start that we ran through in this workshop. If you feel stuck again, and this does happen because I often do, work with clients on this, and it's like kind of an ongoing process. If there's something else that's making you feel stuck, then again, this is about looking into what's behind that, because stuck, is a very broad word that covers a whole range of things. And actually, it could be that you're feeling scared. There's a fear in you about making change. It could be that you have lost some of your confidence, and so making decisions and taking actions is becoming hard, and that can lead you to feel stuck. It could be that you're not going in the right direction. Maybe you've started working on something and actually you're thinking, no, this doesn't feel right anymore. And that's causing you to feel stuck and paralyzed. So I think if you do start feeling stuck again, I think the thing is to, instead of kind of powering through it or beating yourself up about it, is just taking the time to understand what might be holding you back, what might be behind that sense of stuckness, so you can almost work through that before you then carry on your journey.
Do you have an example of someone who has gone through this process successfully?
I have lots of examples. So I coached about 70 people last year through different changes and transitions, and there was people who'd been made redundant and taking that opportunity, wanting to take that opportunity to retrain and do something different, and wanting to build confidence and get their ambition and mojo back to do that. I've worked with a woman who had always recently been doing lots of contract work because she's had 3 kids, and so work just wasn't a priority, but was now in a space where she wanted work to be her priority. Her kids were older, and so we worked on we discovered that what she needs to work on was her setting of boundaries, also how to be more assertive at work because she'd lost some of her confidence in that space. I've worked with people who are transitioning from being fully employed and taking the time to transition out of employment and into self-employment, and some of the changes they need to make and the accountability they might need to keep that transition going so they get to their end goal. So I think work happiness, and I guess that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that work happiness is really, really different for all of us. It's a big umbrella term, but actually what it means to each of us will be very, very different. And so working out what it means to us and therefore how we achieve it, it's really important to do it for ourselves and find out what's in. There's no kind of one size fits all here, if you see what I mean. It's about what's important to us.
It's a very personal process, isn't it?
It is.
So I'm a generalist with many curiosities and interests. How do I focus on 1 or 2 areas?
I think that is the tricky one, but I think prioritizing, it's a bit like the values one. You can have 20 values, but it's only when you prioritize them do you start to understand the ones that drive you most. So I'd take an approach of prioritizing those curiosities and interests into the ones that you would want to do more often than not. If you're thinking about work, the ones that maybe are more inclined to pay you or be financially viable for you, and think about what you want from work. Does it then, if you overlap what you need from work and your curiosities and interests, you might find the sweet spot of the ones that you might be able to think about looking at for work and career in particular.
So do you think it's important to let those curiosities become side projects, sort of side hustles?
It's entirely up to you. So some people might say, actually, I'm okay with work being the way it is because it ticks these X, Y, and Z boxes for me. And actually, I get a lot of my enjoyment and happiness by my side hustle. I did that. Coaching was my side hustle that I loved while I was in a full-time corporate job, until I got to a point where my corporate job wasn't making me happy at all, and my side hustle was starting to make me money and make me happy. So, I kind of made a shift there. But I think, again, it's a really personal decision, and you can only start to make those decisions once you start to understand, what's important to you, what are your curiosities, what are your priorities, and then it might be, well, actually, I love this, but I want it as a side hustle because I also want to make, a lot of money, and that's not going to make me the money. So it becomes very personal. But the important thing is once you can make these decisions with an understanding and a level of conviction, that sense of feeling not in control or feeling lost can almost dissipate because you are back in control and you've made a conscious decision of how to set yourself up.
Do you agree that it would be in companies' best interests to encourage a more open dialogue around employees' happiness? Surely it's a win-win for both parties.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think some are doing it and some are not. I think the tricky thing is for businesses is it's that whole, coming from a marketing background, I had to deal with this a lot, and it was very hard. But unless you can prove it, you know, some businesses find it hard to change their approach on this and their stance on this. But I think it's important to recognize that the absence of data in your company doesn't mean that it won't work. I think it's tricky. I do think there are ways that companies can definitely prioritize and highlight employee happiness and engagement in a way that is right for the company and the culture. But it does have to be something, I think, that comes from leadership. I think it has to come from the top. I think it has to be something that is encouraged and talked about openly. And, you know, corporate change doesn't happen overnight, culture change doesn't happen overnight. But I think we're going to start seeing more and more companies who are going to start leading with a more employee-centric approach. And it'll be interesting to see the business results of those kinds of companies.
I think COVID has brought that forward by about 10 years. I think the whole concept of working from home now and it being an option for people is something that wasn't being considered by many, many big corporates, but now they're having to address that. And I think it's not going away now. Now it's come out of the hat, it's not going back in. And one last question, because I'm very conscious of the time. Are we all asking too much of our work, a bit like expecting our partners to answer all our love languages? Should we also accept that we need to get some reward through balancing in work and out of work happiness?
Yeah, I mean, I think you might have answered your own question there, wherever that came from. But yeah, I think this is the point of the relationship revolution, which is that, yes, we are asking a lot. And sometimes it might be possible, sometimes it might not be. But again, I think it's about us taking that responsibility to say, these are my needs. 2 or 3 of these can get met by work. I mean, I'm kind of, this is a bit reductive, but you see what I mean? Like 2 or 3 of these can be met by work. But I know I also have these other needs. And instead of expecting them from work when I know I'm not going to get them, I'm going to take responsibility to get them from somewhere else and be okay with that. Or it might be, no, I want all of this from work and therefore this work isn't right for me. So I'm going to figure out a different way of making that possible. I do think we expect a lot from our work, but I also think there's different ways we can approach that, recognizing that maybe we can't get it all from work, just like we can't get it all from one partner or one anything, really. It's probably more about spread and balance.
I think the word is balance, isn't it? We've all got to find balance in life, and getting a little bit of satisfaction from every part of our life, whether it's family, friends, work, is the key, and not putting it, as the question was asked, not putting too much pressure on one sector of our life. Otherwise, it just can't possibly deliver. Thank you very much. That's all the questions. I'm going to hand back to Sarah.
Natasha, thank you very much indeed. I hope everyone has enjoyed that and got something from it. And I would concur with everything that you have said. I think when we are one day looking in the rear mirror at this pandemic, we will look back on this and have seen this as almost a golden opportunity to understand ourselves better, to know what makes us tick, to know what drives us, and to what actually generates that internal sense of happiness. So I think this is an incredibly important workshop and you know, and the tasks that you have set everyone to work through. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to everyone who's attended and for your questions and your level of engagement. And I think your level of openness of how much you've shared and taken part. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel that you can contact Natasha directly, and also Caroline as well. As I said to you at the beginning, we've taken a recording of the workshop, so we'll be very happy to send this to you, but we will register you as members of Really Help the Club and also subscribe you to Natasha's newsletter. And whatever you do next, remember that work happiness is not an entirely romantic notion. It's about taking responsibility to work it out for ourselves. It's about your own sense of agency, as Natasha said, one small step at a time, and with the right resources and the right support, a sense of inner happiness and work happiness is entirely possible. So do book in with Natasha for a conversation if you would like to contact her afterwards. And thank you very much for taking part today. That brings the formal part of today to a close. And so just to leave the meeting, you just click on the red button to leave, but thank you very much indeed.